The vast emptiness of space held many secrets, but none quite as desperate as the small escape pod drifting through the Orion arm of the Milky Way. Inside, barely conscious, lay Rose, her blue-tinted skin growing paler by the hour as her life support systems failed one by one. Her species, the Asterians, had never imagined one of their own would end up in such a dire situation. 3 days earlier, Rose had been a respected xenobiologist aboard the research vessel, Starweaver. Her team had been studying the various life forms in this sector of space when they encountered the Raiders, a notorious group of space pirates who attacked without warning or mercy. In the chaos that followed, Rose had barely managed to reach an escape pod, but not before taking a blast from an energy weapon to her side. Now, as she drifted through space, her wounds slowly draining her life force, the pod systems blinked red warnings at her. Oxygen levels, 12%. Power reserves, 8%. External temperature regulation, failed. The pod's emergency beacon continued its weak pulse into the void, but in this remote region of space, Rose knew the chances of rescue were astronomically low. Her people had always viewed humans as a primitive species, barely worth studying. Their short lifespans and emotional nature made them seem unpredictable and dangerous. Rose had never shared these prejudices. Her research had shown her glimpses of humanity's potential, their remarkable ability to survive and adapt. Now, as her consciousness faded in and out, she found herself hoping that some human vessel might pass nearby. At this point, even a primitive rescue would be better than certain death. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of irony. Through her blurring vision, Rose spotted a ship approaching, its design unmistakably human. The vessel was small, probably a mining survey ship, with "Lucky Star" painted on its hull in bold letters. As her pod sensors registered the approaching ship, Rose managed a weak smile. Perhaps these supposedly primitive humans would prove to be her salvation after all. Inside the Lucky Star, Jack Miller had been running routine scans of the area for valuable mineral deposits when his sensors picked up the distress beacon. As a veteran deep space miner with 15 years of experience, he had seen his fair share of strange things in space, but a damaged alien escape pod was a first. His ship's computer identified it as Asterian in origin, a species known for their advanced technology and general disdain for human interaction. "Well, this is different," Jack muttered to himself, guiding his ship closer to the pod. His sensors showed a single life form inside, but the vital signs were weak and growing weaker. Whatever had happened to this Asterian, they needed help fast. Jack knew the risks of getting involved in alien affairs. The Galactic Council had strict regulations about interspecies rescue operations, and the Asterians were notorious for their bureaucratic complications. But as he looked at the failing life support readings from the pod, he knew he couldn't just leave someone to die, human or alien. Lucky Star to Asterian pod, he broadcasted on emergency frequencies. "I'm picking up your distress signal and preparing for emergency retrieval. Hold on tight." Rose heard the transmission through her pod's failing communication system. The human's voice was steady and professional, carrying none of the primitive qualities her people had always attributed to their species. As unconsciousness began to overtake her, she saw the human ship extending its rescue arm toward her pod. Her last thought before darkness claimed her was that perhaps her people had been wrong about humans all along. Sometimes the most advanced civilization wasn't the one with the most sophisticated technology, but the one that wouldn't hesitate to help a stranger in need. The Lucky Star's medical bay was basic by Asterian standards, but it was all that stood between Rose and death. Jack worked quickly, his hands steady as he connected his ship's emergency medical system to Rose's unconscious form. The blue-tinted alien woman lay still on the medical bed, her chest barely rising with each shallow breath. "Computer, run full biological scan and compare with Asterian medical database," Jack commanded, grateful for the universal medical protocols that had been established after first contact. The computer chirped in response, projecting a holographic display of Rose's vital signs above the bed. The results weren't good. The energy weapon had caused severe internal damage, and her body was going into shock from the prolonged exposure to the failing pod's conditions. Jack's mining ship wasn't equipped for this level of medical emergency, but he knew someone who might be able to help. Lucky Star to Outpost 7, he transmitted, keeping one eye on Rose's vitals. Doc Marcus, you there? I've got an emergency situation. The response came quickly, crackling through the ship's speakers. Jack? Haven't heard from you in months. What kind of emergency? Got an Asterian with severe energy weapon trauma. Picked her up from a damaged escape pod. She's critical, document. There was a pause before Marcus replied, Asterian? That's unusual. They usually don't venture out this far alone. Send me the vitals. As Jack transmitted the medical data, Rose stirred slightly on the bed. Her silver eyes flickered open, struggling to focus on her surroundings. Jack moved closer, making sure to stay in her field of vision. You're safe, he said clearly, hoping she could understand him. I'm Jack Miller. You're aboard my ship, the Lucky Star. Rose tried to speak, her voice barely a whisper. The Raiders, they'll come back. They always do. Raiders? Jack's expression darkened. He'd heard stories about the space pirates attacking research vessels in this sector. Don't worry about them right now. We need to focus on getting you stable. Through the speakers, Marcus's voice returned. Jack, listen carefully. Her biology is similar enough to humans that our basic treatments should work, but you'll need to modify the dosages. I'm sending you specific instructions. Follow them exactly. For the next hour, Jack worked under Marcus's guidance, administering treatments and monitoring Rose's condition. The Asterian drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally murmuring about her research and the attack. As her condition slowly stabilized, Jack learned more about what had happened. The Raiders hadn't just attacked randomly, they'd been after specific research data about emerging intelligent life forms in the sector. Rose's team had discovered something significant, something the Raiders wanted badly enough to kill for. They took everyone, Rose managed to say during a moment of clarity. The whole research team. I only escaped because... She paused, struggling with the memory, because Tom, our human liaison, he helped me reach the escape pods. He didn't make it. Jack absorbed this information silently. The Raiders taking prisoners was new, they usually just stole cargo and left. This was different, and potentially much more dangerous. Outpost 7 to Lucky Star, Marcus's voice interrupted. Jack, her vitals are stabilizing, but she needs proper medical care. The nearest Asterian medical facility is 3 weeks away at your ship's best speed. She won't last 3 weeks, Doc, Jack replied, looking at the readings. No, she won't, Marcus agreed. But there's another option. The human settlement on Europa Station is only 2 days away. We've been treating alien species there for years now. It's not an Asterian facility, but it's her best chance, Jack finished. He looked at Rose, who was watching him with those silver eyes. What do you think? Will you trust human medicine? Rose managed a weak smile. I trusted a human to save me from space. I think I can trust human doctors too. Her voice grew serious. But the Raiders, they're still out there. They have my team, my research. Someone needs to know what's happening. Jack nodded slowly. First things first, we get you to Europa Station. Then we can worry about the Raiders. He adjusted the ship's course, plotting the fastest route to the human settlement. As the Lucky Star changed direction, Rose watched the human who had saved her life. Her people's prejudices about humans seemed increasingly foolish now. Here was a species that would stop their work to save a stranger, that would risk political complications to help someone in need. Perhaps that's exactly why the raiders hadn't expected a human liaison to fight back, or a human miner to answer a distress call. The next 2 days would be critical for her survival, but Rose found herself feeling oddly optimistic. She had survived so far thanks to human help. More than that, she had discovered something her research had never shown her: the true essence of humanity wasn't in their technology or their scientific achievements, but in their unfailing willingness to help others, even at great personal risk. As she drifted off into a healing sleep, Rose realized she had stumbled upon the most important discovery of her career, one that might change her people's view of humanity forever. That is, if she survived long enough to share it. The journey to Europa Station was anything but smooth. As the Lucky Star pushed through space at maximum safe speed, Rose's condition remained precarious. Jack found himself splitting his attention between piloting the ship and monitoring his passengers' vital signs, catching sleep in short bursts whenever possible. During one of her lucid periods, Rose managed to sit up slightly in the medical bed, her silver eyes fixed on the stars streaming past the nearby viewport. "Your ship," she said, her voice stronger than before but still weak, "it's a mining vessel, isn't it?" "That's right," Jack replied, checking her latest readings. "Not exactly a luxury cruise, but she's reliable." "It's interesting," Rose continued, "how humans always name their ships. Lucky Star, there's meaning behind that, isn't there?" Jack's hands paused over the medical console. "My daughter chose it," he said quietly. "She used to say that everyone needs a lucky star to wish on. She was 6 at the time." He didn't add that Emma was gone now, along with her mother, victims of a colony virus outbreak 5 years ago. Since then, the deep space mining routes had become his escape. Rose seemed to sense the weight behind his words. "Thank you," she said after a moment, "for sharing that. And for saving my life. I know the risks you're taking." "Risks?" "The Asterian Council, they don't look kindly on unauthorized medical treatment by other species. Even in emergencies." She tried to shift position and winced. "They believe it compromises our biological purity." Jack snorted. "No offense, but that's the kind of thinking that gets people killed. Speaking of which..." He hesitated, then continued, "You mentioned your research earlier. About emerging intelligent life?" Rose's expression grew serious. "Yes. We discovered something extraordinary. A species on the brink of achieving faster-than-light travel. But they're different from any spacefaring race we've encountered. They evolve at an unprecedented rate, adapting to new challenges almost instantly. If the raiders get that research to the wrong people..." A sudden alarm interrupted her explanation. Jack rushed to the ship's controls, his face tightening as he read the sensor data. "We've got company. 3 ships just dropped out of FTL behind us." "Raiders?" Rose tried to sit up further, fighting against her weakness. "Can't tell yet. But they're running with masked signatures, which isn't a good sign." Jack's fingers flew over the controls, bringing up defensive systems. The Lucky Star wasn't built for combat, but like most deep space vessels, it had basic shields and a few surprises. The comm system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. A rough voice filled the cabin, "Mining vessel Lucky Star, this is Captain Blackwood of the freelance salvage ship Midnight Hawk. We're picking up Asterian energy signatures from your vessel. By council law, you're required to turn over any Asterian citizens or technology." "Salvage ship, my foot," Jack muttered, then opened a channel. "Midnight Hawk, this is Lucky Star. I'm conducting an emergency medical transport to Europa Station. Council law also states that any vessel can provide emergency assistance regardless of species." The response came back immediately, harder this time. "Your assistance is no longer required, Lucky Star. Prepare to be boarded. We wouldn't want any unfortunate accidents to happen." Rose's voice was tight with fear. "It's them. The same ones who attacked my ship. Jack, if they get the research data. They won't, Jack said firmly, already plotting a new course. Doc Marcus, you still monitoring? Right here, Jack, came the reply. I'm alerting Europa Station and patching into the emergency channels. But help is at least an hour away. Jack's mind raced through options. The Lucky Star could outrun many ships, but not 3 at once. Fighting was suicide. That left one choice, one that went against every safety protocol in deep space mining. Hold tight, he told Rose, powering up the ship's main drive. This is going to get interesting. The Lucky Star banked hard, heading straight for a nearby asteroid field. The Raiders' ships followed, closing the distance rapidly. Warning shots flashed past the viewport, making the shields flare. You're going into the asteroid field? Rose asked, gripping her bed as the ship shuddered. The magnetic distortions will tear the ship apart. They might, Jack agreed, his eyes fixed on the swirling chunks of space rock ahead. But I've been mining these fields for 15 years. Want to bet those raiders haven't? The Lucky Star dove into the asteroid field just as another volley of weapons fire erupted behind them. Jack's hands danced over the controls, guiding the ship through gaps that seemed impossibly small. The raiders followed, but more cautiously now. There's something else you should know, Rose said, watching the pursuit through the viewport. The research data, it's not just stored in computers. As lead researcher, I have a neural backup. Standard Asterian protocol. If they capture me. They won't, Jack repeated, though his expression grew grimmer. The stakes had just gotten much higher. It wasn't just about saving one life anymore, the raiders were after information that could change the balance of power in this sector of space. The ship rocked as a glancing hit slipped through their shields. Warning lights flashed across the console. Behind them, one of the raider ships had clipped an asteroid, spinning out of control. But 2 remained, and the Lucky Star's power levels were dropping. As they pushed deeper into the asteroid field, Jack realized they were running out of options. They needed a miracle, or maybe just a lucky star. And as the pursuers closed in, he found himself remembering his daughter's words about everyone needing something to wish on. Deep in the asteroid field, the Lucky Star wove through a deadly dance of spinning rocks and magnetic distortions. Warning lights bathed the cabin in an eerie red glow as the ship's systems struggled against the increasing strain. In the medical bed, Rose watched Jack work the controls with a precision that defied her people's perception of human capabilities. Port shield down to 15%, the ship's computer announced. Behind them, the 2 remaining raider ships pressed their advantage, their weapons fire becoming more accurate as they learned the rhythm of the asteroid field. Jack, Rose called out, her voice tense with pain and worry, there's something else about the research you need to know. The species we discovered, they don't just evolve quickly. They can share adaptations across their entire population instantly. If the raiders get this information to the wrong buyers, they could weaponize it, Jack finished, understanding dawning in his eyes as he yanked the ship hard to port, barely avoiding a massive asteroid. Create some kind of biological superweapon. A hit rocked the ship, sending sparks flying from a nearby console. Rose gripped her bed tighter, fighting waves of dizziness. The medical system beeped warnings about her deteriorating condition, the chase was taking its toll on her injured body. Doc Marcus, Jack called into the comm, how long until that backup arrives? Static crackled before Marcus's voice came through. 20 minutes, minimum. Europa Station launched their response team the moment I alerted them, but you're deep in the field now. Jack, your ship's structural integrity. I know, Jack cut him off, his eyes fixed on the sensor readings. The raiders were hurting them, he realized, using the asteroid field itself to force the Lucky Star into a corner. They weren't trying to destroy the ship anymore, they wanted to disable it. Rose's voice came weakly from behind him. The magnetic distortions, they're affecting my neural implants. The backup data. I can feel it degrading. Jack's mind raced. They couldn't keep this up much longer. The Lucky Star wasn't built for sustained combat maneuvering, and Rose's condition was worsening by the minute. They needed an edge, something unexpected. That's when he saw it on his scanner, a massive asteroid with unusual mineral readings. After 15 years of mining, he recognized those signatures immediately. The rock was rich with magnetite and other highly magnetic ores. Under normal circumstances, miners avoided such deposits because of their effect on ship systems. But these weren't normal circumstances. Rose, he called out, your people's ships, they use magnetic field manipulation for their primary systems, right? Yes, she replied, understanding beginning to show in her silver eyes. Our engines, weapons, even life support, they all rely on controlled magnetic fields. That's why this asteroid field is so dangerous for. She paused, realization hitting her. Jack, what are you planning? A grim smile crossed his face. Something stupid. He opened a channel to Doc Marcus. Doc, when that backup arrives, tell them to look for us near the big magnetic deposit in Sector 7. And maybe have a medical team ready. Jack, you can't be serious, Marcus protested. The magnetic forces near those deposits will tear any ship apart. Maybe, Jack agreed, already adjusting their course. But mining ships are built differently. We have to work near these deposits sometimes, so we have better magnetic shielding. It's not perfect, but the raiders don't have that shielding, Rose finished, her eyes wide. Another hit rocked the ship, taking out their rear shields completely. The raiders were closing in, preparing their boarding equipment. They thought they had won. Jack took a deep breath, remembering all the times he'd worked near magnetic deposits, all the tricks he'd learned to survive in the dangerous fields of deep space. Hold on tight, he warned, then pushed the Lucky Star's engines to maximum. The ship shot forward, heading straight for the massive asteroid. The raiders followed, their confidence making them careless. They didn't realize what they were heading into until it was too late. The first magnetic wave hit like a physical wall. The Lucky Star shuddered violently, its reinforced hull creaking under the strain. Warning sirens blared as systems began to fail. But behind them, the effects on the raider ships were catastrophic. The magnetic forces played havoc with their field generators. One ship's weapon system overloaded completely, its energy cells rupturing in a brilliant explosion. The other spun out of control, its engines unable to compensate for the magnetic interference. But the Lucky Star wasn't unscathed. The ship groaned as the magnetic forces threatened to tear it apart. Consoles sparked and died, and the artificial gravity began to fluctuate wildly. In the medical bay, Rose's monitoring equipment flickered and failed. Jack, she called out weakly, my neural implants, the magnetic field is corrupting them. The research data. I'm losing it. The data doesn't matter. Jack shouted back, fighting with the controls as the ship bucked and shuddered. Your life matters more than any research. Through the viewport, they could see pieces of the ship's outer hull beginning to peel away. The magnetic forces were overwhelming even the Lucky Star's reinforced shielding. They had only moments before the ship would be torn apart. That's when a new voice cut through their failing comm system. Lucky Star, this is Europa Station Response Team. We have your position. Hold on, we're coming in with magnetic dampeners. Jack looked back at Rose, who managed a weak smile despite her pain. They had survived, but at what cost? The research data was likely corrupted beyond recovery, and the Lucky Star, Jack's home and livelihood, might never fly again. But as rescue ships appeared through the asteroid field, their dampening fields creating a safe bubble in the magnetic chaos, Jack realized something important. Sometimes the biggest victories came with the heaviest prices. And sometimes, just staying alive was victory enough. 3 weeks later, the medical bay of Europa Station hummed with activity. Rose sat on the edge of her bed, her blue-tinted skin now returned to its healthy azure shade. Through the large observation window, she could see the lucky star in one of the station's repair docks, its hull slowly being rebuilt by maintenance drones. The neural scan results are fascinating, Dr. Lisa Reed, the station's xenobiologist, said as she reviewed the latest data. The magnetic field didn't destroy your neural backup, it merged it with your organic memory patterns. The research data is still there, just changed. Rose nodded, touching the side of her head where her neural implants had once functioned. Changed like I am, she said softly. The past weeks had transformed more than just data. Her entire perspective on humans had shifted fundamentally. The door slid open, and Jack walked in, looking more relaxed than she'd seen him since their first encounter. Good news, he announced. Station security finally heard back from the Galactic Council. The Raider's surviving ship was captured trying to limp into an underground repair facility. They found your research team, alive. Rose's silver eyes widened. All of them? All of them, Jack confirmed. Seems the Raiders needed them alive to help decode the research data. They're being transported to the nearest Asterian medical facility now. He paused, then added with a slight smile, though some of them are apparently demanding to be brought here instead. Something about wanting human medical care. Dr. Reed laughed. We're getting quite a reputation. Ever since your story started spreading through the stations and colonies, we've had 3 other Asterian ships actually request to dock here for medical assistance. The Council's having fits about it. The Council will have to adapt, Rose said firmly. Just like I did. She stood carefully, testing her strength. The magnetic field exposure did more than just alter my neural patterns. It showed me something my people have been blind to, the true strength of humanity. Jack raised an eyebrow. Oh? And what's that? Your adaptability, Rose explained. Not just physical, like the species in my research, but mental and social. You take risks, break rules when they don't serve life, and most importantly, you change. You learn. My people have been static for so long, believing our technological superiority made us better. But real advancement isn't about having the best technology. She walked to the window, watching the repair work on the lucky star. It's about being willing to risk everything to save a stranger. About trusting someone different from yourself. About choosing life over rules. Speaking of rules, Dr. Reed interjected, checking her tablet, the Council sent another message. They're demanding Rose's immediate transfer to an Asterian facility to preserve cultural purity. She made air quotes with her fingers, rolling her eyes. Actually, Rose turned back from the window, a determined look in her silver eyes. I've made a decision about that. I'm requesting permanent assignment to Europa Station as the Asterian cultural liaison. My experience gives me a unique perspective on human-Asterian relations. Jack blinked in surprise. The Council will never approve that. They will when they see my full report, Rose smiled. The magnetic field didn't just scramble my research data, it revealed patterns we never noticed before. The species we were studying? Their rapid evolution isn't just biological. It's driven by cooperation between different groups, sharing advantages and adaptations. Sound familiar? Dr. Reed's eyes widened as she understood. Like humans and Asterians working together. Exactly, Rose nodded. What happened here? A human miner risking everything to save an Asterian scientist, human medical technology being adapted to heal alien biology, different species learning from each other, it's the same pattern. Evolution through cooperation. My people need to understand this if we want to truly advance. Jack rubbed the back of his neck, looking slightly embarrassed. I just did what anyone would have done. No, Rose said softly. You did what a human would have done. And that's exactly what this part of the galaxy needs right now. The station's comm system chimed softly, and a voice announced, "Lucky Star Repair Crew reports primary hull reconstruction is complete. Reactor systems are ready for testing." Jack's face lit up. "Want to come watch them fire up the engines?" he asked Rose. For a mining ship, she puts on quite a light show. "I'd like that," Rose smiled. "After all, I never properly thanked my lucky star." As they walked through the station's corridors together, human and Asterian, miner and scientist, Rose thought about the strange path that had brought her here. She had started her research looking for new forms of evolution, never expecting to become part of one herself. The Raiders had wanted her research to create weapons, but instead, it had helped forge something far more powerful, understanding between species. The Lucky Star's engines hummed to life in the repair dock, their glow reflecting off the station's windows. Rose watched the ship that had saved her life come back to life itself, and she knew she had made the right choice. Sometimes the greatest discoveries weren't found in scientific data or neural backups, but in the simple truth that different species could come together, learn from each other, and evolve into something greater than the sum of their parts. And sometimes, all it took to start that evolution was one human willing to answer a distress call in deep space.